Hello there, Miners fans, and welcome to another edition of This Day in Miners History, presented by the Illinois Farm Bureau. Now, all season long, you have gone to the Miners Facebook page and Twitter page and Instagram as well. On all over the social media, every single day, we've been going over a different moment, a different great player, a different great moment in Miners history. But in 2012, 8 years ago, the Miners made the Frontier League Championship Series for the first time in franchise history, and for the biggest series in the Miners history, we thought we'd kick it up another notch and have a full discussion, a four-part series now on the Frontier League Championship Series in 2012, this being part one. And we have three very special guests who are all there with the Miners in 2012 to discuss each game of the Frontier League Championship Series. Number one, of course, is the Miners manager, who is still their manager and the Frontier League's all-time winningest manager, Mike Pinto. Mike, welcome back.
Oh, so this is going to be so much fun.
Our second guest comes to us from Easton, Pennsylvania. He was the voice of the Miners in 2012 and 2013. Mike Ventola, welcome back to the Miners.
A pleasure to be back. How much I love and miss you all. This is going to be so much fun going down memory lane.
And the third and final special guest here for us in this four-part series on the Frontier League Championship Series from 2012, the Miners' longtime athletic trainer, now the strength and conditioning coordinator for your Southern Illinois Miners. From Nashville, Chris Stone joins us. Welcome, Chris.
Good to see you guys. I'm really excited for this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, it's about the Frontier League Championship Series because it began on this day 8 years ago in 2012 at Florence. We're going to get to that in a second, but we're first going to talk about the lead-in to the Frontier League Championship Series. First things first, Mike Pinto, you made the playoffs on the very last day of the season and had to battle some very bad weather from Mother Nature to do it.
Well, there's a lot that goes into that. So we need one win to get in. And on Friday night, we have Cody Hall, who is the 9-0 with us at that point, had not lost a game. And it is raining. And, I mean, it's coming down. And so we end up, Mike, you remember in detail, we end up postponing that game and going into Saturday. And Cody's going to pitch again. Now, did we not start Friday night's game first?
Yes, we did start it.
We started.
Yes.
And before the game, I had some discussions with the umpires about our plan. And I said, do not want to blow out my starter. I can't get 2 innings in and blow our starter out. And unfortunately, we got off to a loss. Game gets postponed. Saturday gets rained out. And now off we are. And we have to win one game out of Sunday. Or we have to play Monday. Now, what a lot of people don't know is Lake Erie said, we're not playing. We're leaving. Their owner at the time said, I'm not paying for another day of bus. I'm not paying for another day of meal money. We're out of it. We're going home. So there's all of this turmoil going on as well, and we got to get a win. And unfortunately, Cody's got game one, and he's got to pick up, and unfortunately got his only loss of the season that day.
And, of course, you did win Game 2 to get into the playoffs. 6 runs in the fourth inning, 3 home runs, including a couple back-to-back shots. Javier Herrera's put you up for good, of course. He had a fantastic year for you down the stretch. We're going to get to the additions that you made to the team down the stretch in a little bit later in this episode. But your reward for making the playoffs as a wild card team on the very last day of the season, you get a 64-win Traverse City Beach Bum Division Championship team. That was just a tremendous offensive juggernaut, and the pitching wasn't too far behind. 4 players with 15 or more home runs. The Frontier League MVP and Jose Vargas, who drove in 100 runs that year. What was the team's confidence level coming into that series after making the playoffs on the very last opportunity that you had?
I mean, I'll give you my perspective, and the other guys probably have it as well. We played really great baseball the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. And every game, because we were fighting to get in, every game was a playoff game. There was that level of intensity every day. So when all of a sudden we're in the playoffs, we were playoff ready. There was no coasting in. We were a machine. And they believed they could win. When I believe a turning point was when we made the deal to get Javier Herrera, and we'll talk more about that. That was a turning point, and the team saw we believed they could do this, and we were going for it.
Well, Chris Stone, another equation, of course, of playoff success is how healthy the team is after playing a 96-game season in just about 4 months. So, as you said before, we came on today, this team was, in fact, healthy going into this postseason run.
Yeah, so our first 3 or 4 years, it seemed like every single season we would get to the playoffs and lose one of our big guns. And 2012 was the year that we kind of implemented our strength and conditioning program. And, part of that's just the bounces of the ball over the course of the season, but we had everybody healthy and available. And that really made a big difference because our big guys, as we'll discuss, they came up in big situations, which is what you can't do that if you're on the injured list. You can't do that if you're out at a game. So being available is sometimes the best attribute that you can have for a team, and we certainly had that in 2012.
So you go into the Traverse City Series. It's a best-of-5 division series, so you win 3 games, you win it all. And you sweep the Beach Bums in 3 games. You win the first 2 games up in Traverse City against this hugely successful Beach Bums team, maybe the best in their history, including their championship team from 2015. And you come back home and sweep the series. But Mike Ventola, what was it like to witness, especially the first 2 games going up there on the road with that super long 10-hour bus ride and taking not one but both games from such a team?
It's funny because my perspective, and Mike and Chris, they can attest to this, because for me, this was too my first summer as a professional. It really was just where I was a lead announcer and really just kind of taking things for the first time. And, it was just so exciting as enough to make the playoffs, and then knowing how good Traverse City was this year. And I could say this now 8 years later and not worry about getting burned from it. I thought going in, especially seeing the playoff teams, that I said internally, if we can beat Traverse City, it's going to be tough. Whoever comes on the other side to face us, because Traverse City, I felt like they were one of the best, if not one of the best teams in the league that year, because of some of the players that were on that team, like Chase Birch and Jose Vargas and Ryan Still. They had really good pitching, and it starts with your game 1 starter. David Harden truly set the tone, not only for that series, but for the entire playoffs. And David Harden, what I loved about, from my perspective, watching David Harden was, I know a lot, for a lot of aces, they come in with big-time strikeouts. Harden, he got his strikeouts, but it was a pitch to contact, one to, anywhere from 2 to 3 pitches a batter, get a ground ball, and Traverse City had no shot against him. I mean, when you kept Ryan Still, Brian Heary, and Jose Vargas, essentially, I want to say they were a combined 0 in that first game. It was just so fun to see. And from my perspective, I was just trying to do my best to keep the listening audience back in Southern Illinois just as entertained, but also just give them the who, what, when, where, why as much as I possibly can, describe the atmosphere. There were some fans up in Traverse City too, so they were 2 good crowds both of those nights. The atmosphere was good, but then it got a little quiet, especially when Southern Illinois was on top and and winning both games. But I can even remember, too, that getting on the bus from game 2 back to Southern Illinois, I remember sitting in my seat and just kind of trying to be a sponge, because I wasn't a guy in uniform. I wasn't like Mike or Chris in a sense of, putting on that uniform, being, even though I was a part of the team, but just keep your mouth shut and just take it all in and enjoy the ride. And it was so much fun going back to Rent One Park, because I knew game 3. It was going to be tough for Traverse City to come in, because I knew our crowd was going to show up and we were going to be ready to play.
And you certainly were ready to play. Silence on the road, of course, is golden for the road team. So you mentioned David Harden, Mike, and that leads me right into game 1, because of the sweep, and because that the other series between Florence and Gateway went the distance, it went the full 5 games, you had 3 days off to reset the rotation, Mike Pinto, so you could start David Harden in game 1 of the championship series as well. And looking back at Harden's career and the numbers that he put up in 2011 and 2012, I always describe him as basically the ideal Mike Pinto pitcher, going nearly 7 innings per appearance on average for his career, walking only 37 in over 250 innings. And in 2012, only gave up 2 home runs in over 130 innings. What more can you say about your ace back in 2012, David Harden?
Well, it's funny because David came in as a rookie in 2011, and we watched him in spring training. We bring a lot of rookies in, so we're not sure what we're going to get. But we saw in spring training, he just went after guys. He pitched to create contact. And you've heard me talk about it enough. I like starting pitching that creates contact, in and out quickly, throw strikes, stay long in the game so I can go to my bullpen when I want to, not when I have to. And then I really want the 7th, 8th, and 9th. I want the ball not put in play. I want swings and misses then. But early, I really want contact, and David was the absolute prototypical of that.
I think if I could just jump in for a second, we've had kind of an embarrassment of riches when it comes to starting pitching in Southern Illinois over the years. Over our existence, we've probably had about half of those years we've had a pitcher of the year, pretty close. And so David, though he didn't win that award, certainly belongs in that conversation because he was such a prototypical Miners Mike Pinto type pitcher. He may not have had the flashy numbers like Bird or Augie or those guys, but he was certainly every bit as effective.
You're absolutely right, Chris Stone. 5 pitchers of the year for the Miners in 13 seasons. David Harden was not even one of them, despite being such a pitcher. But, of course, being at baseball, sometimes strange things happen that go completely against the numbers. And in the bottom of the 2nd inning in Game 1, as now we get into the game action, he gives up a solo home run. So you guys fall behind 1-0 early. But in a trend that would continue, especially in the first 2 games of this series, you respond right away in the top of the 3rd. Carlos Mendez, a leadoff single, and then Chris Anderson comes up, your catcher, and hits a 2-run home run. And Mike Pinto, Chris Anderson also starting a trend of that we're going to get to throughout this series of players that you might not expect based on the numbers that they put up to come through in a big spot. And Chris Anderson, a guy that you really needed to get late in the season as well.
Yeah, I've always talked to teams when we start the playoffs. No one knows who the guy is going to be. The guy can be anybody. And so some of this may come down to how are you remembered in the biggest moments. This is our biggest moment. And Chris was a guy, when you start getting into acquisitions and things like that, we'll talk about it. But Chris certainly came up big for us that day and throughout the time, once he put a Miners uniform on.
And where you found him is also kind of remarkable. He was an experienced catcher, but he was way out west in Arizona when you got him late in the season.
Yeah, Sean Coughlin, who had been our dude, and in 2011 and 2012, former AAA catcher and just a phenomenal player, a leader on our team, and he had got hurt, and we're sitting there going, okay, what are we going to do now? So now we've got to go out and get one. And Chris was playing in, I forget what the league was called, but it was out in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And I happened to know the manager, and he said, hey, I want to give Chris a chance, and I'll trade him to you and hope it works out for you. And so Chris will always, be a big part of Miners lore.
Well, from Chris Anderson, we go to another very big part of Miners lore. I don't know if I'm spoiling anything, but the next batter after Chris Anderson, the very next pitch, in fact, after Chris Anderson hits his home run to put you up, it's Cannon Lester who comes up and hits another home run, going back-to-back with Chris Anderson. And Cannon Lester, a player, Mike Ventola, who got his chance to be an everyday player down the stretch in August. He played in all but 4 games that month. And talk about a guy taking advantage of his opportunity. Cannon Lester certainly did that in 2012.
When I look up and down the roster, and there are certainly guys that, we're going to talk about some former All-Stars, guys that, were really just true building blocks to this Miners team. When you want to talk about a hidden gem, even though Cannon, had, 2012 was his first season. Of course, this was a returning season for him. He really showed up. And Mike, when him talking about you don't know who the guy is going to be, and Cannon Lester, especially in that Game 1, started to, we didn't know it at the time, but was starting to show that this could be a guy that was really going to help carry us and help us get, fight for this first, championship ever. And, what I loved about watching Cannon Lester was he was a guy that you first of all, one of the best team first guys. He was, without question, was very passionate about wearing the Miners logo, being, a part of the Miners brand. Hard worker. You can tell was just a blue collar, brought his lunch pail every day. Maybe not the most talented guy on the field, but a guy that, without question, was a big part of the supporting cast for this Miners team. And, I mean, I can remember, too, because after Chris Anderson hit that 2-run home run, and, look, Mike and Stoney can tell you, and also the Miners fans who've been listening games forever, I was really pumped. I mean, I'll be honest, because when Kyle Bluestein hit that home run, and I remember taking back, and obviously, look, working in sports, you can't just let one moment, especially if it's the other team, let that, I have a job to do. But when Chris Anderson hits that 2-run home run, I'm feeling good. But it was like anything else. When Cannon hit that home run, it was like a cherry on top. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, Florence just was ahead 1-0, but then now we're sitting here 3-1. That's a good response. It's a good answer. And I thought that was a very good trend, especially as we talk further about this game. And Cannon was a big part of it.
We've got to go back a little bit in time, though, to how all that happened. And Chris is going to have some perspective on this, too. So in spring training, prior to spring training in 2012, Cannon had said to me, Mike, listen, if I can't be an everyday player, would you trade me? This is going to be my last year playing, and I want to play every day. And we had the opportunity with about 2 weeks before the start of the season to pick up Carlos Mendez, who's a phenomenal, experienced, gold glove kind of third baseman. And so I've got to call Cannon in and tell him that of where we're at. And I said, I see you being a guy that is a guy we use a lot, but not necessarily every day and not necessarily in the same position. And I said, but if you'd like me to trade you, I'll go ahead and put it out in the market. This was on the Tuesday morning before we started the season. We're playing Evansville. I put a group email out to all the managers. I go out, do the lineup exchange, and Andy McCauley, the manager, said to me, what's up with Cannon? So I told him what was going on. He said, well, I think I might be interested. I said, well, let's talk after the game. During that exhibition game, Cannon hit a home run. I've got the deal's going to be all set to go. All I have to do is, okay, how are we going to do this? Walk upstairs. Cannon walks into my office right away, and he said, Mike, I changed my mind. I want to be a Miner. And so he was accepted of the fact of he was going to have a place somewhere in our story. Fast forward, Carlos Mendez has to go to Arizona for a visa hearing to stay in the country. And so he's going to miss a Traverse City series, I want to say early part of August. And so we're going to put Cannon at third. And he absolutely went off. He looks like Brooks Robinson playing third and made some unbelievable plays. The fans are riding him like crazy, and he's having a blast with it. Well, we can't keep this guy in the lineup. So now Carlos is back. We head out of Traverse. I got to find a place for Cannon. Will had been struggling. Will block. So Cannon now becomes our second baseman. Chris, I'll let you tell the next part of this because you and I talked about this last night.
Yeah, so Cannon didn't just seize his opportunity. He created it. Like, he didn't leave Mike an option. He has to be in the lineup every night. And Will had been a dude, an MVP-type dude, 17 home runs the year before. And, he's scuffling a little bit. And the thing that makes this team special, you guys mentioned it a little bit, is it's that next guy up type mentality. When you get the chance, you kind of thrive through it. And Will was the utmost professional. He was the greatest teammate that you could be. And you don't necessarily see that all the time if you lose your job to somebody. And sure enough, down the stretch, we had to win every game to get in, and we did. And I'll never forget Will Block hitting the walk-off home run against Windy City. And Cannon Lester's the first guy to congratulate him. And that's just kind of the camaraderie that we had on that team. And, that's what makes it special. We may have had teams that were better, but this team was just special. And those two guys definitely personify that.
And a tip of cap to to Will Block, who was the utmost professional through all of this. And ultimately, in a very quiet way, had a part of us winning a championship on the final day, which we'll get to.
Well, of how different would Miners history look if that trade ends up going through and Ken and Lester goes to Evansville? I don't even want to think about it, to be honest. But now back to the game itself. So you have this 2-run lead. All of a sudden, though, Florence comes back. It's a great game. This game one, a pretty classic game that you all witnessed in Florence. And so they come back with a 2-run homer, again off David Harden to tie it in the bottom of the 6th. However, again, you answer right away. 2 Florence errors in the top of the 7th give you the lead back. And then you turn things over to a bullpen, Mike, that was completely rebuilt down the stretch, as you made not 1 but 2 trades to get 3 guys and recreate an entire back end of the bullpen that you were able to go to in this Game 1 situation, talking, of course, about Nick Sissio, Stephen Greif, and Brandon Caniff, who ended up going all the way to the big leagues 2 years later. What was the process to acquire all of that bullpen down the stretch that helped you so much make the playoffs and then go far into the playoffs?
Well, we were at home. We had blown a couple games with the lead. And as Chris and Mike and you know, Jason, I take every win and every loss to heart. And came in the clubhouse after the second one, went in the coach's room and said, we aren't good enough. This bullpen is not good enough to win a championship. And I remember something that Tony La Russa said, you can't be blinded and can't be fooled. Don't be fooled by a winning streak. Don't be fooled by your record. You have to ask yourself every day, are we good enough to win a championship? And if not, what do we have to fix or what do we have to get? We had to get a new bullpen. We had a kid in Darian Sanford who was an all-star in the first half, was a speed burner on the bases, and he was our chip. And so I put it out there to other managers. Here's what I'm looking for. And got a phone call from it was Greg Langren, I think at that point, was in Washington and said, you want to do something for Greif and Sissio? And the 2 of them proceeded to come in here and have an 0.7 and 0.8 ERA for us the whole rest of the time. Nick Sissio was absolutely our shutdown lefty guy, and Nick Sissio, or rather Stephen Greif, was going to be the strikeout guy to get us to the 9th. And then, again, same situation. River City was out of it, and they were shopping. And so they were shopping Brandon Caniff. I think part of it was, in fairness to Steve Brook, he wanted to get Cunny a chance at a championship, and he was also trying to make his team better. So we agreed to trade Albert Ayala, who had maybe a 1.9 ERA for us at the time, but wasn't a fit. And we would trade him to River City for, I believe it was 2 players to be named later. And we're on our way to Traverse. We did the deal on the off day. And now we got to get Cunny up to Traverse City. So he flies St. Louis, Chicago to Traverse. I remember Larry and I getting in the bus and heading over to the airport in Traverse and picking Cunny up. And I don't think he said 3 words the whole time on the way to the ballpark. As you guys know, and you'll attest that you talk about him yourself, the silent assassin.
Yep. Yes, I'll never forget. Go ahead.
The City series that you previously mentioned, where that was the same series where Lester went nuts. So that series really was a transformative one for you.
For sure.
I'll never forget the word started to come out about the Caniff trade. People from around the league started texting me, and it was always just one word, really, with a question mark. It's like, all right, we're on to something here.
Well, it's funny because and you know what? There were some pivotal trades, and I guess, obviously getting Caniff as your closer. I mean, you fans can see what's behind me and the team I kind of root for. There was a certain guy that was arguably the greatest closer in the history of the game, representing that team. So Kniff was so crucial for that postseason. But I tell you, getting Nick Sissio and Stephen Greif, because in order to get your closer, you had to have that bridge. And I still remember when Mike pulled off that trade, and it was tough because personally, we got to say again, Darian Sanford, not only was he so good for the Miners in the first half, personality plays a large part too. You want to have good clubhouse guys. Darian was such a good kid, and he was, without question, he was a simple guy, but still went about his business, played hard, worked hard. But I remember when Stephen Greif and Nick Sissio came over, and even Brandon Kniff, Stoney, you bring it up because broadcasters, not only do we talk a lot on the radio, talk a lot on phones and talk a lot via text message. Jason, you can attest. And I can still remember when that trade came in, a few of the broadcasters said, some were saying, really, you gave up the fastest guy in the league to get these two arms? Some guys were saying, you're going for this all. And I just answered back them saying, look, sometimes you have to give up good to get good. And, it's not that we wanted to, I know Mike at the time did not want to trade Darian because of anything Darian did wrong, but Mike said it. They needed to get better in the bullpen, and getting those two were so crucial for that bullpen. And it's funny because you remember about Brandon, one funny story about Brandon Kniff, at least from my perspective, doing pregame interviews is something that is important to the broadcast. I will say this as respectful as I can. Brandon Kniff, if you're watching, I love you, brother. You're one of the, without question, my favorite people. But you were the quietest interview I ever did. And I say that with the utmost respect because he truly was the silent assassin, and we were grateful for him.
I should add this. We felt so strongly about Darian's contribution to us that I called him following the season to get his ring size. And the next year when we went to Washington, we presented Darian with a ring on the field because there's no way we do that if he doesn't have the year he does, and we don't have him to be able to trade to get what we needed. So all respect to Darian Sanford, who's had an incredible career and was one of those guys that they talk about what's a base stealer. A real base stealer is one that everybody in the ballpark knows you're going, and you still steal the base.
By the way, for fans who are wondering what kind of speed we're talking about, a league record 75 stolen bases that season for Darian Sanford between the Miners and Washington after the trade. Chris Stone, you talked about how great Darian was we've talked about how great Darian Sanford was as a clubhouse guy and the need to build. After those moves, after the trades, you talked about how the attitude kind of changed in the clubhouse after the new guys come in.
Absolutely. There was a mic drop moment where Rockford is at our place, and it's right before the trading deadline. And before the last game of the series, into our clubhouse walks Javier Herrera, who's big league talent. I mean, just that good. He's known throughout the league, and you could have heard a pin drop. And I'm out on the field pregame stretching Alvaro Ramirez, and he kind of pulls at my sock. He's like, "Poppy, Herrera, championship." Yep, we're pushing the chips in, and that was kind of, we believed anyway, just because we had that kind of confidence in ourselves. But when he walked into that room, it became it changed from a goal, which it's a goal every year, to kind of a mission. This is what we're doing. And it was really fun to be part of.
About that mission right now.
When we did that deal, Carlos Mendez, who had the locker closest to my office, after the deal is done, Ralph walked him into the clubhouse. Well, Ralph went in and got him. We traded 5 players after the season in order to get Javier Herrera. He was that kind of an impact guy. But I was all in. I mean, all the chips were going in. We were going to win this thing. And Carlos sticks his head in my office. He said, "Poppy ain't playing." And so They knew we were going for it. The condition, by the way, was that we not use him that night against Rockford. So he just kind of sat in the clubhouse, or rather sat in the dugout. And then the next night, his first at bat, he put one in the water.
On the first pitch he saw of his first at bat, Mike Ventola, I believe he cashed in on all those chips that were in the center of the table.
Oh my goodness! I remember when that home run hit. If anybody was listening, I might have blown some speakers, okay? Because I let loose. Because it was that point too. Because as Stoney said, this was a guy that was, you know, you could say was the best player in the league. I mean, he was in that conversation, and to get him now a part of us and just first pitch puts one into the water, and that's some distance, by the way, for obviously for folks who, you know, been to Rent One, you know, since the beginning would certainly attest to that. But, I mean, just watching Javier Herrera, you're sitting there, and then for me, you know, up high in the booth, I'm looking at up and down this roster, looking at this team, and it got to the point was, you know, I'm sitting going, yeah, we're going for this thing. And Javier Herrera was probably the cherry on top to the whole operation at this point.
One last hobby story. So, when we were playing to get into the championship, when we were playing to get into the playoffs, and we lost the first game against Lake Erie, and now it's game 2, and Alvaro is walking towards the plate to hit. Javi's the 3-hitter. Javi is standing next to me, as you guys know, where I stand on the steps. He put his arm around this, and he said, "I got this, Mike." What did he do that at bat? Hit a home run. I didn't know it was that easy.
It's not that easy for a lot. But back to the game itself. So you bring in Sissio, he does his job. Bring in Stephen Greif, he does his job. You're up 5-3 after Ken Gregory gets you an insurance run with a double in the top of the 8th. We're going to talk about Gregory next time on This Day in Miners History for Game 2. But Kniff comes in for the 9th. This is your dude. This is how Mike Ventola said he's Mariano Rivera for you. And Florence proceeds to load the bases with a single and 2 walks after 2 strikeouts. So this is all with 2 outs in the inning. You're 1 out away from taking a win into Game 2 in Florence. Do you remember what you were feeling in the dugout when the bases were loaded, 2 outs in the 9th? Like literally the situation every baseball fan thinks of when they think of drama. It was right there in front of your face.
I think the words I've used many times are, this is never easy. Winning a pro baseball game at any level is just never easy. They're not going to quit. You can't run out the clock. You got to play it out. And Cunny was our dude. And so it was going to, one way or another, it was going to be on him.
Well, one thing too, real quickly, Jason, is, you know, going back to that inning, you know, Kyle Bluestein, who had a good game, you know, he had homered, he had singled, he leads off at the walk, you mentioned, and then they pinch hit not once but twice with John Malloy and Ryan Skelly, so he proceeds to strike them both out, but then you had the pesky David Harris there at the top of the lineup that knocks a C&I single, and then Junior Arrojo gets on with the walk. I mean, you know, those were 2 respectable guys, you know, guys that, you know, I mean, look, at the end of the day, Florence is there. They were a part of Florence's success that season. But then, you know, Peter Fatsi, who's the 3rd hitter, he's the guy up. And then Kniff's got to go toe-to-toe with him after Fatsi singled twice to begin the game, was then, you know, 0 for 2 after those 2 at-bats. I remember sitting up in the booth, and I'm sitting there going, Kniff's got to get this. Otherwise, all this, you know, after falling behind early, getting the lead, and then Florence tying it back, we couldn't see another tennis match here. He had to put the nail in the coffin.
And, of course, the spoiler alert, he did put the nail in the coffin, got the final out of the game, secured that victory in Game 1. You have a 1-0 lead now in the Frontier League Championship Series. Mike Ventola, your sigh of relief might have been heard in Cincinnati, I believe.
Yeah, it probably was, sir. Without question. It was definitely heard at Cincinnati. I think they heard us at Great American Ballpark, without question, which is about 15, 20 minutes away. So, but I tell you, too, because, and Mike and Stoney, correct me if I'm wrong, but Florence had a pretty good crowd that night. I was about to say, I think, you know, their fans were getting into it, you know, and especially, too, at that point late in the game, you know, pressure was starting to mount. So, but I remember, too, you know, going into this, and like any playoff series, you always especially want to get game one. And I remember after the game, you guys, because there would be moments too, folks, where after games, the coaches would talk what went well, what didn't go well. And I remember you guys saying it was so good to get game one because you knew at that point you win game two, it's house money going back to Rent One Park, but at least now the pressure's all on Florence. They've got to win game two. Obviously, you don't want to take your foot off the gas pedal, but, in the back of your mind, if we go back to Rent One Park no worse than 1-1, we're still in good shape going back to our place.
Exactly right. I mean, you go into opening the series on the road, your goal is a split. And if you get that out of the way with game one, that allows you to be a little bit greedy with game two. And, we'll go through all that. But that's a really good feeling because, I mean, you talk about Junior Arroyo. He was a dude, and he was a thorn in our side for years. And just the way that inning was developing, I always joked with Mike over the years. I was wondering how we were going to get him an endorsement deal with Tums. We went through a lot of Tums in that dugout.
We sure did. And when we get to talking about Game 4, I'll give a very funny Sean Coughlin story that applies to this.
Well, there's more for you to look forward to, Miners fans. Thanks for tuning in for us for Game 1 of the Frontier League Championship Series, as well as the whole lead-up. The Miners, of course, have a 1-0 lead now in the 2012 Frontier League Championship Series. Tune in tomorrow as we go over Game 2 right here on the Miners Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to continue to follow along as we begin to wrap up the season on this day in Miners history.